Good afternoon, everyone. Just to let everyone know, we're just going to give it about 1 minute just to allow people to trickle in here. Great. So we'll go ahead and get started. We do have an introduction and some housekeeping items to go over at this front of the presentation, just so to allow some people to trickle in. So for anyone who doesn't know, we are Detail Roofing and Sheet Metal. We are a service-based roofing company offering multi-unit residential or services to multi-unit residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional properties. The type of work that we do, again, is service-based. So that means that we do leak investigations, localized repairs, and preventative maintenance on all roof types. Today, my name is Kelly McDonald. I'm a client relations and events with Detail Roofing, and I'm also joined by Michelle Wallace Carswell, our business development manager. So the topic of today's presentation, July 2024 flash flood review. We'll get into exactly what we're going to be talking about in just a moment. But first, we want to go over a couple housekeeping items. So for starters, this webinar is valid for 1 CPE credit for any CMRIO licensed managers and will be available for you to report in the CMRIO portal by the end of the day today. As far as verification of your attendance here today, we are going to be using the Zoom attendance report and sending that to the CMRIO as verification of completion of this learning activity. So for that reason, we will not be issuing certificates. So when you're in the portal uploading this as a learning activity that you've completed, the section where you can upload proof of completion can be bypassed. This webinar is being recorded. We will have it uploaded on our YouTube and made available before the end of the week. However, just to note that viewing the recording after the fact does not count for CPE credit, so you do have to be present for the duration of the session to log the CPE credit. And then finally, we do have time allotted at the end of the presentation for Q&A. So if you do have any questions throughout, please feel free to utilize the Q&A feature to submit any questions. At the end of the presentation, we will get around to as many questions as possible in the time allotted. So just a brief introduction here about what we're going to be talking about. I'm sure everybody remembers July 16th of last year and the extreme rainfall that we experienced. We had over a month's worth of rainfall in just under 3 hours. Over the years, we've seen a lot of really severe weather events becoming more common. Some of them leave quite a lasting impression, as this one has done. And coincidentally, we're in another one of those periods right now with the extreme snowfall that we've gotten recently and all of the subsequent ice damming that we've seen since then. So in July of last year, we did see a total of 215 millimeters of rainfall overall throughout the month. So that, of course, led to widespread flash flooding and subsequent roof leaks. Now, in this period, it was a very extraordinary amount of rain. So we were seeing leaks from buildings that were leaking for the first time and haven't leaked since then. But again, because we are seeing these trends becoming more common with these really severe storms and heavy rainfall, we do want to talk about what it was that we saw and how we might be able to prevent leaks from occurring in the future, even if we are seeing extraordinary amounts of rain. So of course, the weather outlook, not always 100% reliable, especially a long-range forecast that is looking at the entire year. But as of right now, this is the weather outlook for precipitation in the Toronto area for 2025. So as you can see here, as of right now, they are saying that July and especially August, it does look like there is going to be high volumes of rainfall once again. So whether or not that's going to happen in a short period of time, like it did on July 16th, and lead to these flash flooding issues is yet to be seen. But again, hopefully, with some of the contents of today's presentation, we can look at how best to prepare our roofs in the spring for some of this heavy rainfall that's coming in the summer. So specifically what we're going to be looking at, as you can imagine, we received an influx of calls not only on July 16th, but also in the days following. So we're going to be looking at some of the leaks that we encountered in the week following July 16th. And then in each of the categories that we're looking at, we're going to see what the key takeaways are and what we can learn going forward. Now, at the end, I mentioned that we are going to do a live Q&A. However, we did get a lot of questions submitted in advance at registration. And one of the things that came up very often, especially with people that have registered in the last week, was all about ice damming. So although ice damming is not relevant to today's presentation topic, it is very topical with what's going on right now. So we have allotted a few slides at the end just to give a brief overview about ice damming, why it happens, what to do about it if it is happening. And then for a further explanation, feel free to reach out to us at any time. But also, we will be holding another webinar on March 26th that will go into that topic a little more thoroughly. So to kick things off, we want to acknowledge that many leaks can't be predicted, and preventing them would be extremely difficult, especially in a cost-effective way. So we want to look at what some of those hard to prevent leaks look like and understand this particular leak. Again, it was reported that it was pouring into the elevator. Elevator was out of service following this leak, and it was noted that it was coming from the cooling tower roof terrace and that the two drains in that area couldn't handle the overall amount of water. When we were on site for the investigation, again, the elevator was shut down, but in the mechanical room adjacent to the cooling tower roof terrace, there were two locations where there was very recent water staining that was visible. So when we went out to the roof surface that was above the elevator shaft and adjacent to where the staining was present, it was an inverted roof surface there. A number of the leaks that were looking at were on an inverted roof. And just for anybody who right away might not know what an inverted roof means, that is when you have your waterproofing membrane covered by roofing insulation, filter cloth, and then either gravel ballast or paving stones. So in those cases, both with this example and many leaks that we encounter, in order to see what's happening at the membrane level, to assess its condition and understand what's going on, you need to remove all these layers of the roof system. So that's what we did here. We removed a section of the roof system to expose the membrane, as well as the metal wall flashing. When we did this, we found that the membrane seemed to be in pretty fair condition. We didn't note any defects with the actual waterproofing membrane. However, we did find two exposed cavities in the wall hidden behind the metal flashing. So as you can see in some of the photos here, especially this one, it's really just wide open and exposed behind here. As far as why they're there, I'm not sure. I don't know if it was something that it was just during construction was missed. This building was 17 years old at the time of the investigation, and up until that point, it's not something that had been discovered previously. And until this happened, I'm not really sure how it would be discovered unless you just happen to luckily open up this particular section of the roof area for assessment of the membrane. So in this case, especially, it would be extremely hard to prevent this leak from happening, especially because of the level of rainfall that we had, unless it was just pure luck that you happened to open this particular location. So the next one here, it was leaking into the living room of somebody's unit. There was some staining on the ceiling, some active water droplets, also an inverted roof system here. And when we went up to do the investigation, there was a section of metal that was lifting directly above the leak area. During the investigation process, this was ruled out as being a contributing factor to the leak. In other cases, we have seen this being a contributing factor, and of course, we wanted to make sure that this was refastened and resealed, both to prevent any water from getting in and also to prevent this piece of metal from coming off completely and becoming a safety hazard from potentially flying off the building. But ultimately, the result of the leak was due to the severe deterioration of the stripping membrane, which again can only be seen when the various layers of the inverted roof system were removed. So when we removed this section of the roof here and investigated the membrane, there were a few different areas along the stripping membrane, which is the vertical of the wall, that were deteriorated to the point that it was split and cracked and allowing water to get in. So again, the reason that this would be hard to find in advance is even if you were just doing a condition assessment and seeing the overall quality of different areas of the roof system, you would have to be very lucky to open this spot in particular and see that this damage was occurring. Just because there is deteriorated stripping membrane here doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be this level of deterioration or any deterioration, say 10, 20, 30 feet down. It is something that can happen over time and in localized areas. So for this section, the final leak that we're going to look at, firstly, we're going to go back to about 4 weeks before July 16th, when we received an emergency leak call in June. Coincidentally, this was also a leak that was flooding into the elevator shaft and where the elevator had to be shut down until this was addressed. I remember this leak very well because I happened to be on call at this time. So we received this call. It was somewhere between 10 to 11 p.m. and had our guys go out to investigate what was going on here. So again, elevator shaft, the elevator itself was out of service. However, there were multiple areas where water was coming into to different areas of the building, including the mechanical room. And it was actively leaking when our guys arrived on site for the investigation. When we went onto the roof surface, and again, inverted roofs have to remove the various layers to expose the membrane. For starters, when we were lifting up the roofing insulation, it was sticking to the membrane, which can be a sign that the roof is beyond its serviceable life when that insulation starts to adhere to the waterproofing membrane. So once we actually got the insulation up and were able to assess the condition of the membrane, it was found that it was extremely deteriorated and was beyond its serviceable life. So at this point, we would absolutely recommend that the roof be replaced. At this point, it's very hard to do any sort of localized repairs just because tying a new membrane system into the old system that's failing, it's not guaranteed that that's going to stay bonded and last over a period of time. So it is very difficult to manage the various level of deterioration at this state. So what we did here was we did do very extensive reinforced temporary repairs. We did 2 layers of a liquid membrane with reinforcing mesh just to make sure that we sealed as big of an area as possible in the time allotted. And before leaving site, we did make sure that there wasn't any more active water getting into the building. So we were able to stop it before leaving site. Now, for the next 4 weeks, everything was fine. However, again, due to the state of this roof and also the level of rainfall that we received on July 16th, there was further activity following this period. So although the board was very proactive and immediately, once they got the results of the leak investigation in June, immediately started planning for replacement of the roof. However, getting the roof replaced in that short amount of time wasn't feasible. And again, because of the extraordinary amount of rainfall, they did experience further water ingress. So we returned just to do additional temporary reinforcements until they were able to have the roof replaced. So Michelle, I want to pose a question to you because this is something that you have addressed many times over the years. But if someone were to ask you how to prevent leaks once the roof is beyond its serviceable life, what would you say?
Um, Near impossible to prevent leaks. Once your roof gets to that level, you're in a leak management program where we can help contain and manage the number of leaks that you're experiencing, but you definitely are going to experience leaks. The roof has lost its elasticity and it's just going to continue to fail. It basically starts to rot and nothing really sticks together. But there are some things that we can do. We've worked with lots of corporations where we do some proactive means like reinforced repairs, stuff like that, to try to limp you through and get you through to the re-roof. But basically, to expect a large number of leaks over that time. That's why, and the reasons why it's recommended to complete annual inspections on your roof and annual maintenance so that you can catch the roof's lifespan earlier and your roof doesn't get to that point where it's at failure without being aware of it.
I think quickly I'll just say we've had cases where people will have old roof systems that have no leaks. And if that's the case, consider yourself very lucky, but make sure that the fund for re-roof is there and in place, and you're going to still plan for that in the future. Don't allocate those funds elsewhere because a old roof that has no leaks is a anomaly.
Thank you, ladies. So with that in mind, some key takeaways about hard to prevent leaks. Protected roof systems, which would include inverted roofs as well as green roofs, can be the most difficult to detect leaks in any case, even if it's a known leak issue. And that becomes even more difficult when you don't know about it and you're trying to look into leak prevention. So catching leaks on protected roof systems, like inverted and green roofs, not impossible, but very tricky, very unlikely. And then, as Michelle said, there's not a lot that can be done between the time that a roof is at the end of its life until replacement is completed. So that point is really more about leak management and trying to reduce the total amount of leaks that you're having. So next we're going to look at leaks that are possible to detect. They can be difficult at times, but we'll look at what can make it a little less difficult. So in this case here, when we traced this leak to the area above, we found that there was a plumbing stack with a high dome flashing that was just a little bit too large for the stack, and there wasn't any sort of sealant or anything in place that was sealing up the gap or the exposure that you can see here. So it was immediately suspected that that was the source of the leak. While we were on site, we didn't do a full water test, but we did pour some water down this area. And when we did that, the leak became active. So we were able to complete repairs and get this sealed up. Now, realistically, this is something that would be very easy to identify during an overall inspection or when completing any routine maintenance. The thing that makes it a little bit tricky here is that this was on somebody's private terrace, which isn't typically included in overall maintenance that we're completing for the corporation. So that might have been a little bit harder to pinpoint that this was going on in advance, but again, not impossible. So next we have this leak that was occurring that when we traced it to the roof surface, there were some conduit penetrations above this leak area, and the conduit penetrations were going right into the roof surface. So this is something that we come across very often. However, it is the most ideal to have these conduits in some sort of housing, whether that is a pitch pocket or a tall cone, some sort of flashing that it can go into and have sealant just to make sure that it is going to be sealed tight because it is an especially vulnerable area. So this is typically something that if we were doing an overall scope of maintenance and we saw conduit penetrations like this on the roof, we would include as part of the maintenance recommendations to expose the bases just to see what the base of it looks like, if it is adequately sealed, or if it requires any additional sealant to make sure that there isn't going to be any water penetration. So in this case, the existing sealant was deteriorated to the point that it was allowing water entry. We were able to apply an additional sealant and then make further recommendations to have a pitch pocket installed in this area. But again, if it was part of a standard maintenance program, this would have been included as a standard proactive inspection. So this one here, and again, you might be noticing a trend here because this is another leak that was related to rooftop penetrations. So in this case, the roof area that was above the interior leak area, there was a dividing wall or dividing fence that had post penetrations. But again, these ones couldn't be seen because it was an inverted roof system with paving stones. So to expose the bases of these penetrations and see what was going on, we did need to remove the paving stones, insulation, and filter cloth. So once that was completed and we were able to inspect these bases and see what was happening, it was found that the penetrations throughout the membrane surrounding them were severely deteriorated, wide open in some cases, and allowing water to get in. So again, this one may have been hard to identify just because with the amount of penetrations that we typically see, not only on one single roof surface, but the different roof levels throughout the roof area, knowing that this would be the ideal location to have an inspection done and seal these bases may have been tricky to identify in advance. So in this case here at this building, there were actually two leaks that were occurring on opposite ends of the building. However, they were both related to similar issues, and that was again the stack penetration. So both of the plumbing stacks that we found on opposite ends of the building, when we exposed the area, not only were the stacks themselves damaged, you can see there's just a small perforation in here, but enough that water can get in, and then also the surrounding membrane was quite deteriorated to the point that it was cracking. So again, this was something where we were able to make the subsequent repairs. And now we know going forward that this is an issue that we have seen at two of the stack penetrations. And it is possible that it's occurring at other stacks or at other penetrations throughout. So this is a great way to understand the issues that are impacting this building specifically and to work on a maintenance plan that's going to be very specific to this building. So some of the key takeaways here, when it comes to roof penetrations, they are an extremely vulnerable area, just because, as the name suggests, it is a penetrated area of the roof. The roof deck is cored in these areas, so if they're not watertight, if there are any water entry points, it's very easy for water to get in and leak into the building in the area below. So what we suggest is proactively inspecting the bases of penetrations during routine maintenance, which can help to identify any issues before they lead to leaks. Sometimes it can be harder to identify, again, where to start because it's not always feasible. It's rarely feasible to be doing all the penetrations throughout the roof in one round of maintenance or even over a couple rounds just because of how many penetrations there are. So if there are any indications of issues, whether it be rust that's forming on vents or plumbing stacks or the flashing that can be seen, if there's any extremely split sealant that can be seen lower to the roof level, just kind of above the gravel, those can be indications that there may be issues occurring below that gravel level as well. Also in these cases, the earlier that you're able to implement a maintenance program and start inspecting the different bases throughout the roof system, the better chance that you have of getting ahead of any issues. Okay, so next up, we're going to be talking about quality of installation and some of the issues that we saw related to that. So before we dive into that, we do have a couple of polls that we're going to be launching throughout the presentation. So we're going to go ahead and launch one of those now. Um, Jessica, if you can launch that for us.
I think earlier when I
Okay, yeah.
seized control of the presentation, I might have given you polls. My button is gone. Thank you.
All right, so what is the most important when completing a roofing project? And this is the most important to you. There might be different things on here. Uh, you might think all of these things are important. However, what is the most important? So we have some people ringing in now between the possible answers, which include cost, contractor reputation, project oversight, quality of work, and warranties. So again, which one do you value the most? Right, we're going to end this now and share our results. All right, so top answer here, which is great to see, is most people value the quality of work. So second to that, we have warranties, followed by cost, contractor reputation, and then the final one being project oversight.
Unknown number.
All right, so now we're going to look at some of the leaks that we encountered that were related to the quality of the installation and why some of those items are very important. So one of the ones that we looked at here, it was leaking in multiple areas in the building, including into one of the hallways. There was really heavy water staining on the baseboards and the carpeting. And then the unit adjacent to this hallway also had a lot of water damage in their front entrance, including again on the baseboards and the flooring and wrapping around the wall here. So when we traced this to the roof area above, coincidentally also a stack penetration, again, very commonly a source of water ingress. However, in this case, what we found when we exposed the roof was that there was a patch that was completed by others. I don't have the details on hand about when the patch was completed. However, it was found to be lifting and just not quality work that was done here. There was separation of the membrane that was occurring and quite a bit of water built up under the membrane from where it was getting in from this patch. The next one that we're looking at here, this was a retail unit that had some pretty severe leaks happening in multiple locations. So fortunately, they had ceiling tiles that could be popped out to allow water to drain into a bucket that was placed on the floor. And then that was also helpful when we were completing our investigation to be able to easily see behind the ceiling to get a better idea of what was going on. So the area here that was open immediately above there, there was a plumbing pipe. However, you'll see it's hard to see in the photos because it is small, but there is some water droplets and staining on the actual plumbing pipe itself. But you'll notice that there's no staining or active water on the actual deck. So in some cases, this can make it a little tricky to determine whether it is a roofing or a plumbing issue. But then in this case as well, as I noted, there was water coming in from multiple areas. So there was also water throughout some of the beams and on the HVAC unit in this area here. So we didn't know this immediately when we went on site, but after the investigation was completed, we did find out that the roof was replaced sometime in 2023, so about a year or within the year of this investigation happening. At first glance, when you got up on this roof surface, there weren't any immediate obvious defects. If you just took a quick look, it appears to be a nicely installed roof system. When we were completing our investigation, we took a look at the drain. There was a buildup of sealant there. We removed some of it, and some of it was deteriorating. And then ultimately, we ended up finding that the blue seal, which is a piece that's installed inside the drain insert that connects with the interior piping, was not installed properly and therefore was leaving a bit of a gap, which was allowing water to get into that area. And that's why in those last photos, that would make sense why there wasn't any water staining or signs of water on the underside of the deck, because it was coming in at a piece of the connection at the drain insert. That makes sense why it would just be coming down the actual drain pipe on the inside. So further to that, especially because, again, it's coming in from multiple areas, so we wanted to see what those other potential water entry points were. At the large unit that was right next to this drain, we were taking a closer look under some of the metal pieces and found that all of the posts, the stripping membrane that was installed there, was just really poorly done. So stripping membrane is something that requires more attention, more detail. It is more time consuming, and it's very often that we see corners being cut, and it's clear that this part of the process is being rushed. So in this case, it's very clear once we're able to see these areas that it's not something that was installed to manufacturer guidelines. There's areas where it's opening very easily. This should never be the case. Your membrane should always be adhered properly and watertight. In this case here, it's just cut very sloppily, leaving an opening here. And then at this case here, there's not any sort of sealant or added protection at the end of this termination here. So this whole area here just had an exposed concrete slab where water was getting in and then leaking into the area below. So for these reasons, whether it's a replacement that's being done or localized repairs, we see so many cases where a corporation is paying to have these repairs done. Sometimes they might go with the lowest cost option, but sometimes the quality isn't there. And then ultimately they end up having to pay to have the repairs redone, or in some case to have the roof replaced much earlier than anticipated after a new roof is installed. So ultimately, it costs less to have it done right the first time. Uh, if you are having any roofing projects done, always ensure that you're enlisting a reputable contractor with proven experience in the type of work and the membrane system that is relevant for the job. So there are a lot of different roofing companies out there, but some might only specialize in replacements. They might not do any service work. You might have some that do both replacements and maintenance, but they only do it on one specific roof type. It might be only single ply roofing or only shingled roofing. So if that is their specialty, then you wouldn't want them doing maintenance and repairs on an inverted roof system or doing the replacement of the roof that we have here, which is a 2-ply SBS modified bitumen membrane. So making sure that, again, they do have proven track record with the type of membrane and the type of work that's being completed. And then finally, especially with something as big as a roof replacement project, it's so important to have third-party oversight. We don't expect you guys as property managers to be able to go up and, take a look at the membrane installation after it's completed and determine whether it is as per specifications and manufacturer guidelines. So having an engineer or a third-party roofing specialist that can oversee the project and do a final walkthrough just to confirm that everything is installed properly is just going to ensure that it is done correctly and lasts as long as it should. All right, so especially in relation to flash flooding, we are going to talk about the importance of drainage. So before we dive into this section, I am going to launch another poll here. All right, so in an emergency, would you be able to quickly locate your rooftop drains? So answers here are either yes, no, or not sure.
Oh, I'm curious the results. This is so important.
Like our responses are slowing down now, so I will end this and share the results. All right, so 69% of people say that yes, they would be able to locate the rooftop drain
Great.
in an emergency. There are 23% that aren't sure, and 8% say no, they would not be able to locate their rooftop drains. All right, so this first one that we're going to look at here, the top photo in the left-hand corner here, that photo was sent in by the resident of this unit while the active rainfall was happening, just to show the level of water that was out on their private terrace. And what was happening in this case was the water was backing up into the unit from this sliding door here. So we did come out to do an investigation in the days following. And for a couple of things that were happening here, for starters, the paving stones are flush with the doorway here, so any level of rising water was susceptible to come in here. But ultimately, one of the biggest issues here was that although there's a hole cut in the paving stone here and there is a drain screen, once that whole area was removed, there wasn't a drain actually in place there. And actually, there wasn't a drain anywhere in this private terrace. So there's also a cover over here, no drain, no drain to be found anywhere in this location. So there ended up being further investigation done by an engineering company, and between the blueprints and just the investigation that they completed, it was discovered that the closest drain to this terrace area is actually inside the planter box in here. So there is a drain, supposedly. However, you have all this soil, greenery, full trees in this area. Um, in cases like this, where there might not be a rooftop drain in that area, sometimes what's a possibility is to either install additional drainage or potentially an overflow drain. However, in this case, that's not really feasible due to the design of the building. So the design of the building, the exterior is all a combination of metal and glass, and then this area in particular, there is a sloped surface here, so there wouldn't really be any place to install any sort of overflow drain. So in this case, it's actually still an ongoing thing that we're working with the corporation on. So the next steps here are to better understand the existing drain that is here in this planter box and make sure that there are drainage provisions so that if there is any more rainfall, especially the level of rainfall that we saw, making sure that there is a clear pathway for water to drain from this area and into this planter box. One thing that we did do when we were on site last year in the summer was we did channel the insulation. So very much like that sounds, we just created kind of channels or openings in the underside of the insulation, just so the water beneath the paving stones and above the membrane level had a bit more room to move around in these areas. Because other than this drain here, the next closest drain is out of the picture here, but somewhere on the other side at one of the other terraces. So this next leak that had to do with drainage, it was impacting two units. So the unit directly below where the drain was, as well as the unit directly below that. So when we got up on the roof surface to investigate, pretty much right away before even sweeping back any of the gravel or looking at the drain, taking the drain screen off to take a closer look, there was a small sign of a drain defect. And then again, once the drain screen was removed, that drain defect became a little more obvious and clear. So here's a closer look. So again, you can see the membrane here, it is exposed, and there's an area here where water could or was potentially getting in. And then also the drain insert, there was a space there that again was allowing water to get in. So multiple drain defects that were happening here. So a big part of routine maintenance is checking and clearing the drains, and especially if it is a roofer that's doing it rather than a super or a general contractor, it's very easy to identify any defects that are happening both at the drain or the surrounding membrane while these drains are being cleaned. So at this point, this corporation wasn't yet on an annual maintenance program. I believe this was actually the first time that we had gone out to this corporation. But now, again, it's something that we are aware of. So building out their maintenance program, of course, we're going to be checking the drains, but we know that they have had a history of some drain defects. So we don't have any full highlights about any drains or any leaks that were related to gutter issues. We did have a couple service calls that we completed over this time from gutters or eaves troughs that were overflowing. But I do want to pose a question, and Jessica, I know this is something that you've been asked many times before. So this is one of our pre-submitted questions that we got at registration, and it asks, should the corporation invest in larger eaves while upgrading the exterior or roof?
Yeah, thank you. I think with eaves in general, we get a lot of questions either about making the eaves wider or installing leaf guards. And the main thing is a lot of times people are looking for a way to eliminate maintenance requirements, and that's just not going to be the case with either of those methods. Like the only thing you can really do in like very forested areas or areas where debris is getting into your gutters is clean them more frequently. That could be biannually or quarterly. If you install leaf guards, it's important to note like fine silt you'll still need to clean out. And with a wider gutter, that means if you're having a lot of debris and weight is a problem, weight's going to be a greater issue, and the surface area for debris to fall will be greater. I'm sure like there are specific situations in which it might make sense, but it wouldn't make sense for the sake of just cleaning them less often. It's going to be the same requirements. And if you have a perfectly good gutter system, for the most part, our recommendation is just to maintain and clean those frequently.
Thank you. Okay, so this leak here related to drainage, it was impacting a commercial unit. This one was also active when we arrived. There were large buckets underneath the area to minimize any damages and catch this active water that was dropping. So on the roof surface here, really severe flooding happening pretty much entirely throughout the roof surface. You can see our poor technician here had some wet feet after this, and most of them did that day because the water levels were rising, past his ankles here. So on the roof surface, there were only two drains throughout the roof, and both of the drains were blocked with debris. So as you can see here, it doesn't look like there's a crazy amount of debris. However, there is enough that it's blocking the water flow to these areas and leading to this excessive flooding throughout. So in these cases, especially because the water is ponding all throughout, if there's any areas that it can find to get in and leak into the building, it will find those. So in this particular case, there were a few maintenance requirements, but in the area directly above where the leak was occurring, there was a post penetration that had some, again, very deteriorated sealant that was cracked in many places and split open. Which was allowing water to get in. So while we're on this roof surface, we of course cleared those drains of the debris that was there. After that happened, the water started flowing freely. Didn't seem to be any blockages happening below roof level. And then once the area was clear enough and dry enough, we were able to apply some repairs to this post penetration. However, both of these things, not just the drains, but also just renewing the sealant. Both, again, very common maintenance items, both very preventable. So key takeaways when it comes to drainage. First of all, knowing where your drains are in the case of emergency so that they can be easily located if need be. Very often we come across situations where the drains are either buried by gravel ballast or in some rare cases, they might not be installed exactly where they are noted on the blueprints. So making sure that you do know where your drains are, so that if there are any flooding situations, you are able to go up, check your drains, clear them, and make sure that water is flowing freely to them. Also, just as a part of regular maintenance, whether it's annually or some cases, more regular drain cleaning may be required depending on the building and just what the surrounding area is like, but ensuring that the drains are routinely inspected and cleared, especially ahead of any anticipated heavy rainfall. Also, just again, the importance of having a roofer inspect the drains versus somebody like a general contractor or a super, so that if there are any drain defects, whether it's at the drain insert or the surrounding membrane, those can be identified and addressed. And so, Michelle, before we dive into our last section here, one of our pre-submitted questions asks, what are some budget-friendly methods of preventing leaks prior to them happening?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think number one, what you just touched on is cleaning your drains. That's number one priority. Everybody should be doing that at least once a year. Also sealing some penetrations, making sure your pitch pockets are sealed, any wall penetrations, that sort of stuff. Those are some key areas that you want to take a look at. And then if you have a sloped roof, any exposed plywood is very crucial to deal with as well on the complex. So having somebody do an annual inspection of the complex and making sure that there's no exposed plywood, that would be a number one priority on the townhome complexes.
Michelle?
Oh,
So with that in mind, we are going to look at some of the leaks that we saw that were related to common maintenance items. So this first one here, and this was very common throughout this period on and after July 16th, this building had leaks occurring in multiple areas. So in this particular case, there was some heavy staining in the hallway, as well as the super had noted that there was water inside the garbage chute. And when we were there for the investigation, we did know that there was some signs of water staining inside the chute. So first we're going to look at that area above the garbage chute. You can see that there is some sort of sealant at the base here. However, all around this area on this metal roof, there are some exposed areas from either missing or deteriorated sealant. There is quite a bit of rust that's happening there. Sorry. Yeah, so there were a few exposed areas, both immediately surrounding the garbage chute, as well as the area just a bit further down the roof had some open and exposed seams from deteriorated sealant as well. So while we were on site there, we applied caulking to seal the seams as well as a compatible liquid detailer just as further reinforcement. So a very similar issue happening above the hallway leak area. You can see, especially in this first photo in the top left, that there is a whole bunch of different sealant, different caulking in these areas, and all different colors and all different states. So you have it all down this side here. There's deteriorated sealant on this section. This one here appeared to be relatively new and in fair condition. And then also on this vent up on this section as well. So in multiple areas, the deterioration was again to the point that it was split and cracked. Any deterioration at that point is ultimately not going to serve its purpose anymore, and water is going to be able to get into these areas. So similar to the area above the garbage chute, we removed that deteriorated caulking, applied new caulking, and then a compatible liquid detailer as further reinforcement. So the next one here also just happened to be happening in the garbage chute. So this one here, fortunately, wasn't impacting a residence unit or any common area of the building. However, of course, we still wanted to identify where it was coming from and stop further water from getting in. So the garbage chute that we went to above here, at first glance, you can see that there is pretty heavy rusting occurring. However, we didn't see any corrosion occurring. It wasn't at the point that there was any openings from that. However, there were several other points throughout this area where there were areas of deteriorated sealant or exposures or various areas where water could get in. So again, very similarly, combination of caulking and a compatible liquid detailer that we applied to these areas to seal them and make sure that water wasn't getting into these areas. This, along with some of the other things that we've looked at so far, are very common maintenance items. And unlike something like an inverted roof that to assess the level of the condition of the membrane, you have to remove all these layers. In these cases, this would be very easy to identify when completing an overall inspection of the roof surface and could have been addressed had they gone ahead with any maintenance recommendations. So this one that was happening here in the washroom, as you can see from the roof overview, there are a lot of penetrations happening throughout this roof, as well as skylights, HVAC units on curbs. So a lot of different vulnerable areas that can be susceptible to leaks. In the area that was immediately over this washroom leak area, the penetrations that were there were either fully exposed or had deteriorated sealant that left the areas exposed and vulnerable as well. So most notably was this tall cone with the conduit penetrations. So it is good that they have the tall cone to house the conduit penetrations. However, the sealant that was here previously was deteriorated to the point that it was wide open here, just leaving a straight open shot for water to get in and leak into the area below. With the pitch pockets nearby for the conduit penetrations, not only was the sealant on top deteriorated, but these also aren't compatible with this roof system. This would be the type of material that you would use on a single ply roof like a TPO or a PVC. Ultimately, over time, because it's not compatible, there would just be an issue with the adhesion of the underside of this. So over time, it would be something that would lift up and then create another potential leak issue. And then the final maintenance item that we're going to look at here, when we came out to investigate this unit, they had a remediation team in already to deal with some of the interior. So you can see that a big section of the flooring is removed as well as the bottom area of this wall. So I imagine that there was originally signs of damage and staining there. However, when we were doing the investigation, this was all cleared out. They had fans in the area. We did notice, though, that in the adjacent furnace room, there wasn't any signs of water entry or water staining in this area. This was a townhome with a sloped roof, so it did have an attic space. Including the attic as part of the investigation, if there is one, is very, very important. If you're just looking at the interior and then going on to the roof, you could very likely be missing very key elements that are going to help you diagnose the leak or see if there's any potential condensation issues happening in the attic. So in this space, we did find that the plumbing pipe that was in there had staining running down it and did appear to be coming from the roof. So on the roof surface, a couple penetrations here, including that plumbing stack where we saw the staining in the interior. And it doesn't look as major or severe as some of the other deteriorated sealants that we've seen. But in this case, there was deteriorated sealant that, again, because of the amount of water that we saw, even though it was a very small area, it was enough for the water to come in and cause significant damage into the area below. Close by to this area, there was also a nail that was right on the seam of the shingle. So when it comes to shingling, there's a very specific line to shingle within. If you're anywhere outside of that, if it's on the seam, if it's too low, or if it's exposed entirely, that just creates a potential water entry point. So it's very, very important to, when anybody is completing any shingle repairs, that the nails are going very specifically in that line that's underneath the shingle tab and hidden, not exposed to any water infiltration. So we were able to complete some repairs here. And then we did note that throughout the roof area here, there were a number of areas where there were either missing or damaged shingles, or in some cases here, just really poor quality shingle installations that had been completed at a previous date. So again, just a lot of these very common maintenance items, and maintenance was something that was required and recommended throughout. So a lot of these ones that we're looking at here, as well as the drainage, and inspecting penetrations proactively are all different maintenance items that can be done to, with any luck, reduce or prevent leaks from occurring. So the final pre-submitted question that we have here, and Michelle, I'll pose this one to you. So somebody asked, from what we've seen, did certain roofing materials, designs, or maintenance practices help buildings hold up better? And with storms like this becoming more common, are current building codes and standards keeping up?
I think definitely the buildings that do complete regular maintenance definitely held up better than the ones that don't. I would say that overall that would be definitely a for sure. And it is difficult with the way new builds are now being built. Some of them are not being built very well. Um, so it does make it a little bit more challenging for new buildings, but the best way that you can reduce the number of leaks that you experience is to implement an annual roof maintenance program and be proactive.
Great. So with all of that in mind, just final overall thoughts about the July 2024 flash flooding and prevention going forward. Again, just the importance of making sure that the drains are clear and that they are clear regularly, especially ahead of any heavy anticipated rainfall. Further to that, making sure that there are routine inspections and maintenance that are being completed. That's just going to provide the best opportunity to identify any potential leaks before they happen. Maintenance is not guaranteed to eliminate all of your leak issues, but if there is any way to prevent them, it would be through active investigation or active inspections and proactive maintenance. And then finally, when it comes to any roofing project, whether it is a localized repair or a full replacement, it is vitally important to ensure that you're enlisting a reputable contractor uh, with proven experience, not only in the roof system or the membrane type that they're working with, but also with the type of work that they're doing. And then, as mentioned in one of the earlier slides, for any replacements, ensuring that there is project oversight to ensure that everything is being installed correctly. So just very quickly here before we go into our live Q&A, again, because of the weather that we've seen over the last 2 weeks, we have seen an extreme amount of ice damming all throughout Southern Ontario. So we do want to just talk about ice damming very briefly. So for starters, there are three things that need to happen for ice damming to occur. Number one, snow will fall and then accumulate on the roof surface. Step two is that the snow melts and trickles down the slope of the roof to the roof edge. And then step three is that if there are sub-zero temperatures following the heavy snowfall, that will cause the melted snow to refreeze at the lowest point, which is again commonly the roof edge and along the gutter system. So the thing here is that the second step of this process is commonly attributed to heat loss within the home and specifically related to the attic. So when you think of last year, for example, I don't know if anybody can recall or just remembers from walking around or whether it's from their building, but we didn't really see much, if any, ice damming last year, but that's because we had a very little overall snowfall, and overall the temperatures were milder. Typically, if we did see really cold freezing temperatures, it wasn't following snow accumulation and snowfall. However, this year has, of course, been very different. We've had really extreme cold for the majority of 2025. And then, of course, we got over 50 centimeters of snow in the GTA recently and even more in other areas throughout Ontario. So let's say hypothetically after this recent heavy snowfall we got, let's say it wasn't freezing. Let's say it was the temperatures were mild. We had this snowfall, but then it was plus 10. If that were the case, it would be very unlikely that we would see ice damming occurring, especially the level that we've been seeing, because the snow would just naturally melt and wouldn't refreeze along the roof edge. So it is because of the specific weather that we've seen, the heavy snowfall, the freezing temperatures. But again, that step 2 would be related to attics. So taking a look at the attics, because of the climate that we live in, the attic serves a very important functional purpose. So that includes venting moisture from interior heat, regulating interior temperatures, and maintaining cooler roof temperatures in the winter months. Uh, so ideally, the attic temperature should be the same, if not very similar, to the temperature outside. If there's a big difference, if it's much warmer within the attic than it is outside, then it's likely that you have certain issues, and that can lead to condensation and potential ice damming. So making sure that you have a well-functioning attic that is going to serve its purpose, that all comes down to insulation and ventilation. So taking a quick look here, what a normal, well-functioning attic is going to look like. You're going to have a vapor barrier and insulation evenly distributed throughout the space. However, you want to make sure that the insulation isn't blocking the edge of the attic space here, because that's where there should be perforated soffits installed for air intake. So realistically, in the attic, you should be able to see daylight along the roof edge so that you can have cool outside air coming into the attic, moving through, and then escaping through the air outtake vents. These air outtake vents are either going to be towards the peak of the roof on the flat field surface, or something that we're seeing more commonly is ridge venting that's installed right along the top. Either way, as long as it does have a space for the cool air to move through, leave towards the top of the attic. These vents should not be connected to anything. They shouldn't be obstructed, even from other elements within the attic or structural pieces for the roof. They should just be free and clear to allow air to move through them. And then also, as far as any of your exhaust vents, so anything connected to a bathroom fan or a kitchen fan, it's very, very important that those connections in the attic are venting right out of the attic space and connected properly to a roof vent. Uh, Exhaust vents, and these are ones that are connected to bathroom fans or kitchen fans. They're venting hot, moist air from these areas. So if there are any issues with the connection, then you're just going to have that hot, moist air pumping directly into the attic space. What we see very often is either that it's not reaching the roof entirely. So even if it's a couple feet, even if it's a couple inches off, that's still going to allow air leakage and allow that hot, moist air to vent out into the attic space, which will just make it too hot, too warm. Also, what we see very commonly is even if it is reaching the roof surface, if it's not connected to a compatible vent or if there are any issues with the connection, again, that can lead to air leakage. So any amount of air leakage at these exhaust vents can lead to too much heat and too much moisture in these spaces, which can not only lead to condensation, potential mold growths. You can have leaks that are occurring in these areas below that aren't coming from any defects from the roof, but just from the buildup of condensation in the attic. But then also, once we have snow accumulation and freezing temperatures, all of these attic deficiencies can lead to the snow on the roof melting and then leading to ice damming. So as I mentioned, we just wanted to keep that part very brief to explain how it is that it happens. But final thoughts here, and ultimately, if you do have ice damming occurring, it is extremely key to have a thorough attic inspection completed to understand the root of the ice damming issues and how best to correct them. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution for ice damming. It's going to be dependent on what that attic inspection entails and what the findings are to figure out what's going to be specific to that unit. We have encountered situations before, especially in the last 2 weeks, where if there is ice damming occurring at multiple units, it is feasible that it is the same issue that's occurring throughout, because in a lot of cases, especially with newer installations, it's very likely that the way that something was installed in one unit could have been installed the same way in another. So it is possible to get a bit of a sample between a few units, but ultimately having that attic inspection done to understand what's going on, and then from there, what the next steps are going to be. As mentioned, not only are you going to be able to see what's going on, but you're also going to be able to identify if there's any leaks occurring, whether from the roof or from condensation, and identify if there is any potential mold growth that requires remediation. So we will open up our Q&A now. I also, as I mentioned at the beginning, 1 month from now on March 26th at 1 p.m., we will be hosting another webinar. So I will be sending out an email before the end of the week that just has some further details, as well as a recording of this webinar. And at that time, I will also share the Zoom link and registration details for anybody that wants to join that. It will cover a lot of what we've seen in the last few weeks with the extreme ice damming, more information on some of the specific things that can be leading to attic issues that can contribute to ice damming, actively dealing with the ice buildup that we've seen, and a few case studies as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Kelly.
Yes.
I will read out some of these questions. I know I had technical difficulties, which basically voided all of Kelly's talking breaks. So thank you very much to your lungs and for speaking to us for the last hour. So the first question that we have in the chat, if the leak was reported, what's the best remedies for extreme weather? How would a roofing company approach that issue? Michelle, do you want to
Okay.
that one?
So I think it depends on the extreme weather. Like for example, in July, where we were talking about July of last year with the rain, there's lots of sealants and things that we can do to mitigate the water ingress immediately. You obviously want to do a leak investigation, and you have to trace out where the leak is. If these last couple of weeks, it does pose some challenges with the ice and snow buildup on the roof. You can apply some ice melt if the roof is if the roof is safely accessible. You can also really help with mitigating the interior damage during extreme weather. So what we did a lot was we divert the water with using materials to try to mitigate any damage interior until we can safely access the roof. But it's going to vary case by case situation. The last few weeks, some of the roofs we were able to access the defects, and some of the leaks that it was just not safe to access the roof. So it's a case by case situation, but you can always definitely do something to mitigate or prevent the immediate water ingress.
Yeah, thank you. I think basically just to echo what Michelle said, we can definitely call us and we'll come out. The main difference is if you do maintenance, you're kind of doing it proactively, so you're saving a little bit of money as far as emergency response. And then if you go the leak route, we can definitely help you. But like Michelle said, sometimes it's going to look a little bit different. Like the storm the last few weeks, we've been a bit halted at points, but we're working where we can. And it's a lot more applying salt and waiting, and kind of a lot more time is put into those kind of things where you could do it proactively, but we understand every situation is different. Okay. Is there any maintenance required for the roof drains?
Yes, definitely. You should be cleaning your roof drains at least once a year. In some buildings that have more debris buildup, sometimes they need to do twice a year. Like if you have a lot of like foliage and stuff with the trees and the gutter systems. And then like flat roofs, rooftop drains, professional roofers should be inspecting them as well. We inspect the surrounding drain membrane and inspect the integrity of the drain. So that's really important, as well as when you're cleaning your gutters. You want to inspect the seams and anything like that that can cause an issue.
On that strain, I have a question just asking if it should be a plumber doing drain cleaning or a roofing contractor.
You sort of want to think of it as like you don't want a roofer doing your plumbing and you don't want a plumber doing your roofing. So anything at roof level should be a roofer, and anything below roof level should be a plumber.
Yeah, I think the cleaning, they can definitely, if they could clear the drain, they might miss kind of critical issues with the tie into the membrane. So that's one of the main considerations. And yeah. Okay, I don't know how much time we have left for additional questions. I'll go to the next. Let me know, Kelly, if we
Yeah, because we're running out of time. Maybe just one more question, Jess, because
Yeah,
everybody's very
of
patient.
course, yeah. Let's see. I'll do a long one. Okay. I'd be curious to know recommendations on how to deal with homes where ice damming is occurring. Many homes I manage have vaulted ceilings with little to no attic space. In addition, in many areas of Ontario, snow can accumulate up to several feet on the roof, blocking vents. Shoveling snow off the roof to open up the vents comes with its own problems and variables, and isn't always a viable option.
Ice damming is it is a complicated topic, as Kelly went through recently. It is, and she also mentioned it as a case by case basis. We can definitely help out and see what the options are for you. Maybe there's some things we can do for the individual buildings, but it needs to be a case by case situation. There's lots of tools that we can use. It just depends on the situation and how the building is designed.
I think too, like Kelly was referencing a diagram of a house, which is all good and fine if your house looks just like that. Sometimes with new developments, we'll see situations where a lot of ice damming will happen and they have everything up to code, but because of like situational differences between their place and another very similar place, they are experiencing a ton of ice damming. So even like if there ever is a leak, one thing I will say, and this doesn't really reflect like for a vaulted roof ceiling, but sometimes we'll have roofers come out to fix something roof level, and then we'll come back later and find out there were also concurrent issues with the attic space that weren't checked. And so that ends up causing like longer issues in the long run. As far as shoveling off this roof, unfortunately, I think it's quite an unprecedented amount of snow that we have had recently. In cases, if it's going to be a safety concern, snow removal is kind of your only option, but there's also like a certain amount of load for snow. So just maybe if that ever does occur, just reach out to us and we can discuss options, kind of what is a safe limit as far as snow. If a vent is blocked, it's kind of case by case as far as clearing. Awesome. We have other questions. I don't think we have time to get to them.
Yeah, we're already over time right now, so we will go through them after and reach out to anybody that does have remaining questions to make sure that they are answered. Also, as mentioned, before the end of this week, I will be sending an email with a recording of this, details for our next webinar, as well as some other details. In the meantime, though, I would just like to thank everybody so much for joining us today. Thank you again for your patience following some of our technical difficulties earlier in the presentation. We do hope that everybody enjoyed this and learned a little something new today, and we do hope that you will join us for any of our future presentations as well. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, Kelly.